Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is DTC Growth Strategies Beyond Paid Social, Jessica McGlory and Owen Bell. This is being recorded. I'll send an email with the link once the recording is ready to everyone that RSVP'd. Feel free to engage in the chat if you want to ask any follow-up questions. We'll try to get to it. On to our speakers.
Cool, quick introduction. So my name is Anish. My background was helping to run growth for different companies for about a decade. Grew up in the Bay Area, spent about a decade in San Francisco, and now I'm on the East Coast in Brooklyn. Built an executive recruiting firm about 4 years ago. Now we're a team of, I believe, 16. And what we focus on is hiring executive level growth leaders for a lot of fast growing companies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica McGlory. I'm head of growth at Verb Energy. Verb Energy is an energy, food, and beverage brand that is dedicated to making sure people can feel incredible every single day. I oversee all different parts of our growth function. So that includes growth marketing, of course, acquisition and retention, as well as digital product, data and analytics, merchandising, and brand and creative. So definitely love to kind of look across the whole swath of growth and excited for this talk today.
Cool, and I'm Owen Bell. I'm the director of growth at Honeylove. We started out as a shapewear company a couple of years ago, but have expanded into different functional garments these days. There I'm also kind of overseeing growth in general, so retention, acquisition, creative, but kind of came from the paid social world. So this will be an interesting topic.
Awesome. So when everybody RSVP'd to this event, there was an open field to put in questions that you wanted to ask the experts here. And so we curated, I want to say like 8 to 10 of the most interesting questions for this particular audience. We'll be asking them through this kind of a process. And if you have specific questions that you had while people are talking, feel free to just put them into the chat and we can do our best to address them. First one's pretty interesting. I think now that everyone's sort of scrambling to find as many different channels that may or may not work as possible, what do you do when you're first kind of pinpointing a brand new channel and you want to know whether it works, and then you want to know if it's going to scale? What's both of your sort of process for that, and what has been the process in terms of things that have worked and anecdotes that have like, oh hey, maybe that wasn't the right way to approach a brand new channel that you've sort of seen?
Yeah, I can jump into it. So I think we've actually been at Honeylove like fairly cautious in expanding channels. So for us, it takes a couple peers to recommend something. Definitely kind of go to the broader growth community to ask around if there's any similar companies that have done it. And then we'll always kind of try and find like really a high level consultant that can help us navigate that channel. So we typically like consultants versus agencies. Or doing it in-house initially. And so I think that vetting process is really important, trying to make sure we're getting the best talent there. And then really after that, focusing on creative and making sure that we're best set up from a creative standpoint to give the channel the best shot. Yeah.
That's interesting that you mentioned that you go at it really carefully and you have to get sort of like check marks, or not have to, but you prefer to get check marks from other companies that have tried it and said it could be a viable channel, and sort of what's the internal reasoning for that, wanting to have those check marks there that it has worked for a couple other companies?
Yeah, I do think, like I said at the beginning, like my passion in paid social, and we're heavily invested there. We're still seeing success there. And so, it's a pretty high bar to beat Facebook, and most things aren't going to. And so, just want to make sure that like we're pretty confident about the investment in this testing budget before we're going into it.
Cool. And what's like the trade-off versus like, okay, being a channel that has been proven out for other companies versus like being the first one on a channel before everyone else has started to crowded it up and like are sort of bumping up the CPMs and taking off all the inventory? Do you sort of weigh those pros and cons a little bit, or no, you just know that what feels better is as a channel that's already been kind of like proven to be a little bit successful for someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, there's definitely a trade-off. I mean, being a first mover on anything gets some great advantages. I think it is, I mean, kind of company culture and growth culture. I think like at other companies I've worked at, there's been a real growth hacker mindset where, we're trying to find that early edge. But I think just given the space and like the maturity of like DTC and digital advertising, it's harder and harder to find those edges. So, I mean, I think there are things where I wish we were a little earlier. It seems like podcast affiliates getting more and more crowded, especially post iOS 15. But I think we're also, pretty focused on profitability in hand with growth. And so with that mindset, just take a little bit more of a cautious approach and want to get some validation before we're jumping into things.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that, by the way. And Jessica, I'd love to hear any of your thoughts.
Yeah, at Verb, it is a little bit different. We definitely will dive into any sort of new channel. When evaluating the new channels, it comes down to audience. In our acquisition strategy, we focus on the main sort of premise of it is what like we talked about extensively is known as like the suffocation strategy. We do not have Coca-Cola budget money to truly get in front of every single person at a rate where we could do it for everyone, even though theoretically anyone could enjoy a caffeinated energy bar since caffeine is so widely consumed, particularly in the United States of America. So instead, we have these growth segments that are focused communities that we want to always look like we're everywhere. So everywhere they are is where we start to strive to be. And we try to figure out where they are as immediate as possible. Facebook is, of course, huge for us. And so that was kind of like, okay, that's just a core channel. That's something that we continuously try to see how we can get better at. But outside of that, we really try to see where else are these different communities hanging out, whether it could be another social channel that, is really popping off, like if it could be TikTok, we're about to do some Reddit ads, or it can be something as, the blogs that you start to read when you are when your kid just turned 1 to 2, because that segment really enjoys verb bars. They need something quick to grab and to go. So we try to find them anywhere and then meet them there. And after that, once we kind of identified that, and if there's a real opportunity in there, and by real, it needs to have enough where we could hopefully be able to try to scale budgets to at least 100K per month within about 6 to 8 months. That would be the goal. Then what we do is we look at costs. We look at CPMs. We try to see how it needs to be measured. Attribution is, of course, a hot topic, but try to just cover the bases from all sorts of things, what it says in platform, what it says in GA, what we're seeing in terms of how did you hear about a survey, directionally what we're able to see from a cost per new visitor point of view. And that's usually what we look for when trying to test and scale that new channel, set up the sort of testing plan and make sure that there is enough budget to actually give it a chance. If you're not reaching enough people, there's no chance. Like I can't imagine going after like 1,000 people or something, and then, oh, we had no conversions. Well, what's like your typical conversion rate? Like, and what is it? Where was it supposed to pop up if it's not a LastClick channel or something? So those are kind of all the things that go into taking that consideration.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And you mentioned how caffeinated we all are in the US. I'm drinking cold brew right now. So like going through that exercise of like finding where your audience is, meeting them there, and then working on like what the right marketing effort is to get in front of them. Like, all right, where are some interesting and unique places where the obsessively caffeinated people or people who want to become even more caffeinated kind of are, that you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of an interesting area to kind of reach them?
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of most interesting, I don't know if it's most interesting. It's probably the area where a lot of brands aren't super huge in is micro affiliate. We really built that up quite aggressively since September of last year, and is our third biggest channel that we have. So it's just a bunch of people with, Instagrams, blogs, etc., that, we really focus a lot more on, like, okay, like if we have like 2,000 people and the average person drives 3 purchases, that's actually pretty impactful. And it adds up quite dramatically. And what's really stunning is it doesn't actually take a lot of work once you're past the part of getting them in a drip. So after that, it's more just logistics, getting them products. So finding the communities there has probably been one of the most impactful things that we've done, because those micro, and they are micro influencers, except we pay them on a performance basis. So that's why they're micro affiliates instead of just flat rate. By getting in those communities, they have so much legitimacy. They have so much real influence. People really trust them because they don't see them as like the big influencers. And we work with them. We work with a ton of amazing influencers. Don't get me wrong. It's just a different sort of relationship that they have. They're more likely to have a relationship where it is one-to-one, even though it's Instagram, where someone is they're following each other, than only this mass group of people following this person, and they don't follow any of those people back. So I would say meeting them in those little microcosms of Instagram, like organic, on their favorite blogs, in their favorite email newsletters that those same people send, has been highly impactful.
That's the first time I've ever heard the term micro affiliate. So that's awesome. You always hear about micro influencers, but I'm guessing maybe the differentiation as a micro affiliate is a little bit more business oriented. Like they have newsletters, they put more effort into building their own communities and audiences and getting all the referral links and all of that. Or like, what is kind of the difference between a micro affiliate and a micro influencer?
I mean, for us, the big difference is like, actually, like I'll say a lot of influencers have the sort of business oriented mindset. It actually comes down to influencer. We see that as paying a contracted flat fee.
I see.
Whereas affiliate, we only pay per how many purchases they generate for us. So, so yeah, it's just a different model. It de-risks quite aggressively, being able to partner with the people, because you're not at rolling the dice as aggressively by paying each one a flat fee. And yeah, I will definitely say it's gotten wildly more competitive. So, but we've been fortunate enough to not have as brunt of an impact on that part of our business, simply because we've had the relationships now with most of these people for at least 6 months.
That's awesome. Get in early and like build those relationships a little bit early. And what I love is sort of like, you get 5 great people who are doing this and who are great growth practitioners. You're going to get 5 different approaches on how to launch new channels and how to go about it, right? I think both of you have a slightly different approach. I think Jessica, it was really like, where's the audience at? Let's go find them there, which doesn't mean you're not doing that as well, Owen. But I think the first thing that pops in mind is like, what are the other brands doing? Let's make sure, okay, this brand over here has got 5 channels and all 5 are working. We've got 3. Let me go tack on those other 2 because it's working for that other brand, which is not wrong. There's no right or wrong answer. So I really like that to see like 2 different approaches right there. So Mike asked a pretty interesting question. Like, what are you doing? Like, as far as like having a system that manages all those micro affiliates, like, are you doing it yourself? Do you have a whole kind of team of assistants and, people who manage all of that? Or is there like a centralized system that manages all of that and/or platform?
Yeah, I mean, we're evolving that over time without a doubt. At first it was just sheer volume. And so we partnered actually with what traditionally is a customer service sort of like agency. Except it's the same concept, right? As how they would outreach and have communications with customer service. Instead, they just help us be able to get lead generation for those micro affiliates. And we built out the drips, the email drips, we built out what sort of process it should be from end to end. We now are able to build out more in-house, so we are now going to have them only exclusively focus on lead generation, and in-house really focus on owning the relationship, building out a graduation program, if someone has really grown and shown how many purchases they can get from us, they shouldn't just stay as a micro. They can become a macro affiliate, which comes with additional sort of perks that we're building out to make sure that they can continuously feel really happy working with Verb, and hopefully give us some preferential placement across their different owned channels. So that's how we've approached it. And we use the tool, we use Grin in terms of how we're actually finding the people. And communicating out, we kind of have both Grin and Refersion going.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. And that's super interesting. I think the process of being able to utilize, a large team to do all of that and training them up, and it really pays dividends over time, even if it's hard to get them trained up on first and onboarding them, all of that. It's definitely a pull. So thanks for that right there. And I think Danielle asked, how many sponsored posts per month do you usually deploy with each micro affiliate? I don't know if it varies quite a bit from like person to person, or whether you have it sort of like templatized a little bit more.
Yeah, no, they're allowed to post as often as they would like. A lot are pretty strategic. They try to do it where they can get a bonus. So that makes sense. Which is no problem to us. The unit economics actually still come in substantially lower than Facebook, probably like 30 to 40% lower than Facebook's CAC. So it all works out. So how many go up per month? We probably have about, if I had to think about it, probably about 1,000 to 1,500 posts that are going out per month. Jeez. For micro affiliate.
That's awesome. And if you're getting 3 conversions per each of those on average, or whatever it might be, and especially since you're doing it on a purely CPA model, it's great that you're able to get that. So thanks for diving into that. Super helpful. Cool. So you dove into this a little bit, Jessica. You didn't. Oh, sorry, Owen, if you want to dive into that as well.
Yeah, I was super interested in that, because I feel like affiliate and kind of micro affiliates also been our, if there's anything outside of Facebook, that's what we've been doing, but haven't quite gotten it to that scale. I guess curious what you're defining micro as and how you all see that.
That evolved very aggressively too. At first, we were like absolutely no more than 100K followers, and that was because the only reason why that became the case was we already had a very robust influencer sort of program, but through one agency, and they didn't really partner with anyone who had less than 100K. So we were like, let's try to get everyone that they're not reaching. They ended up expanding a little bit to what they would allow in their agency. And we also have another agency that we work with for influencers, so we could get a bit broader. So then we just decided to let for micro affiliate go all the way up to 1 million theoretically. I will say that that's very rare that we actually approach someone at 1 million. It's just that, and we would instead call them macro affiliates. But in terms of the micro, at this point, we're cutting it off at about 350,000. We found that group of people who have not signed on to an agency yet are incredible performers. Like 200K to 350K is such an incredible sweet spot, because they got a little more volume than those who are smaller, but people still feel a bit closer to them and feel a little bit more legitimacy than sometimes some find with the million plus sort of crowd.
Those are followers, you mean? So 200 to 350K is like you've gotten a sweet spot, and that there's enough of a following, but people still trust them, and they're not with an agency, so you don't have to go to like CAA and negotiate their contracts, which is fascinating, because when I talk to people who kind of are some of the actually a relative works at Google, and is working on working with like the major like Hollywood agencies like CAA for like YouTuber contracts, and I'm like, wow, this is like the person who's working on like Hugh Jackman's contract is working on like a Twitch streamer's contract, and I'm like, this is a whole new world. So that's awesome to be able to jump into that.
Definitely.
So Owen, where have you done a ton? You said it's like your second channel behind paid social. Were there any kind of interesting learnings of like anecdotes of things sort of like worked, didn't work, insights from that kind of stuff that you're working on?
Yeah, and I might have misspoke, not necessarily our second channel, but kind of like the one we're most excited about from a testing and get out of paid social. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've also kind of pulled people from the CX team, and it's very similar, you know, sales, customer relationship project or process, but haven't quite, and like get a ton of content from it, whitelist from it, but haven't quite been able to scale it from a revenue standpoint. So we're probably doing like 50 to 100 people a month. But I'm super impressed that y'all are doing $1,000, and I think that seems interesting. We're trying to transition a little to kind of these influencer aggregator programs that's like Octoly or Magic Link, and works through an affiliate basis. And that's kind of what we're thinking is will help us scale there, but really interesting that you've been able to do it kind of in-house organically.
Yeah. And do you feel like you lose a little bit of like the personal relationship with some of these people? Not that you can easily manage 1,000 personal relationships with affiliates / influencers, but you know, going to like an aggregator platform, do you think is there anything kind of missing when you're sort of doing that?
I think so, but I think honestly at this point, like we're probably too personal with our micro influencers. I mean, really for it to make an impact, we need to scale it. And it is someone like, again, from the CX team who's, you know, loves building these personal relationships, and that's really fulfilling. So figuring out how to kind of hit the gas and almost make it as personal, but less, you know, time intensive is kind of the struggle we're hitting.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that. And so jumping into this next question, Jessica, you touched upon a little bit that like, if you don't really see the ability to spend a certain amount of money and reach a certain amount of quantity of audience, you don't really see the viability of going and trying to test a channel. But like, is there kind of a quantitative limit of, okay, well, hey, if I can't get in front of X amount of people, or if I can't spend X amount of dollars, you know, the channel isn't ready for me to start thinking about it yet. How do you sort of think about that?
I will say, when considering a new channel, if for my opinion, please don't ever think about it in terms of spend. Every time I hear people just go, oh, like it's not worth it if I don't do a 10K test. What does 10K mean on TikTok versus 10K of what you would do on Pinterest? From a CPM perspective alone, it doesn't make sense. Like if you have one channel that is at a CPM of $6, you got another one that you could literally get down to $253. How on earth are you comparing that 10K the same way? So instead, I implore people to try to push reps, to give you real numbers, not these benchmark numbers that are outlandish, but like really, what could you expect from a click-through rate perspective? What could you expect from a CPM perspective? Or talk with other growth people of what they're seeing on those platforms for CPMs and for CTR. Take your conversion rate, the one that's most realistic, you know, don't do the aspirational one, do the one that you're seeing most consistently for your worst sort of channel that you still invest some money in, and use that to figure out how much money you're going to do a true like media plan to figure out what that translates into, because that's going to tell you like what you need. I would say that like you want to aim, and different businesses have different things. For some businesses, 5 purchases in a day is actually huge because they're selling something like for $2,000. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, whereas for someone else, you know, that would be like a day that would really, really go down as a dark day or whatever if it was 5. So you have to figure out from that conversion rate, how many purchases typically would you want to see per day from your usual channel? I would say that being able to trackable, however you're tracking, at least being able to see about a 10th because it isn't fully optimized, I think that's more than fair. But I definitely always discourage people just throwing out some random number. Like it should be based off of CPM, CTRs, and your subsequent conversion rate, and finding that budget that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes people look at just the dollar amount versus the learning, you know, impact that you're able to have with an early channel. And I think doing growth the best, it's not just sort of an opportunity to push a button or like turn a spigot and have money come out the other side, right? Like there's processes in between, you know, pushing a button, pulling the lever, and having money come out the other side. There's a lot of learnings and a lot of kind of building blocks that kind of get you there. And the quicker you can get those building blocks. And I think it also speaks to like, if you have the organizational tolerance and risk toward jumping towards very new channels or very new opportunities or areas other people aren't into, those probably are not going to be opportunities that scale immediately. But if you can be early there and get some early relationships, you can probably, ride that out over the next 12 months while other people are sort of catching up. And so if you are just looking at scale immediately, it's pretty hard to get excited about scale with anything that's emerging. I could be wrong though. Maybe like there are these emerging areas that are not super super crowded that still have scale. But I guess if you find those, you got to move pretty quickly. What about you, Owen? When you're thinking about this and kind of selling it internally and also just going about it with your own strategies, how do you sort of create process or systems around that?
Yeah, I feel like we also don't look or like try to avoid that just setting a number and saying, hey, this is media spend we need to hit. We'll have like a high threshold in terms of like total media budget that we'd be willing to commit to something like pretty unproven. But then as long as we're below that, and we can usually have enough budget for anything below that. Really for us, the key determiner is like, is the creative optimized, and have we invested enough in like the creative process to get something that's truly native to the channel or feels like it really fits with the audience. And so usually that takes a couple turns, and that's kind of the harder piece, and just like holding back on the media spend until we feel like we've got a creative that's really strong and resonates.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach as well, right? Making sure that you've like filtered through the newer channel until you've gotten the creative that hits, which also proves the point of how important, the creative and the messaging and the positioning is to whatever that new channel is. And have you found like massive differences in creative that work in one place versus another place?
Mm-hmm. And I guess these are paid social examples, but I feel like YouTube and TikTok, for the most part, like Facebook works everywhere, but in those two places in particular, I feel like it took us a long time to kind of crack that creative piece. And it wasn't really about tactics or getting enough budget or optimizing over enough time, but really getting platform specific creative that spoke to the unique audience there.
Yeah. Cool. Are there any hints toward like the types of creative that you've noticed worked for all of you on like, let's say something like a TikTok versus like something that, you tested and was like, okay, well, hey, maybe this worked elsewhere, but it's not resonating as much with this particular audience?
Yeah, TikTok, I mean, nothing too surprising, but like on Facebook, we're doing a ton of kind of longer form informational video ads. And TikTok's really what's worked for us is like testimonials with kind of native comments or, extremely, well, really we work directly with like one creator on TikTok who's almost like on the payroll. And so them just like churning out things that like, they know work on the platform has worked with their audience, works there versus Facebook. We've got a team just cranking out assets and iteratively testing. So looks pretty different.
That's interesting. And then do you just take that like TikTok superstars like native content and then just blast it in terms of paid ads, and that's kind of like a big portion of the creative strategy?
Yeah, we don't take, I mean, we're just posting it on our page. So it's like types of things she's done on her page, but yeah, she's giving us the content and we're using it as an ad versus reposting what she's done.
Okay, that's super interesting. Cool. Have you noticed big differences, Jessica, in terms of different channels, or certain stuff just tends to be the one that works across the board?
I mean, yeah, creative for us, I mean, is really interesting. Our biggest channels, like micro affiliate, like influencer, it's being made by the people, and they are posting it organically. So we give a brief, but we don't necessarily have the most say as to what will be produced. And then on Facebook, yeah, we're definitely still trying a lot of different sorts of creative that might come through. We're always testing, always trying to see what's up on it. And yeah, with TikTok, same sort of thing. I mean, well, we kind of found a little bit of a groove on TikTok, so I think we're not trying to break it too much from an ads perspective. But yeah, and then with translating, I will say that like the same sort of messaging, the same sort of story that we've been telling for our bars does tend to resonate against across channels. For instance, we found great success with inserts across like, you know, HelloFresh, Green Chef. That's worked really well for us. And I would say that the messaging that you see on the insert, it'll just be written in a different way, but it's the same exact messaging that we put across all of our channels.
So those food kit companies are letting you pay to have inserts into their boxes?
Yes.
I didn't know that. I didn't know they sell third-party inserts. That's super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, why don't they just upsell? Anyways, that's super interesting. I didn't know that. I guess it's another revenue channel to break even more. So that's actually really great for any food company to jump into. Who did you go through for that? Was there like a third-party agency for like, co-branding or anything like that, or you just kind of grew a relationship there?
Yeah, no, just through the relationship. I'm the person who is pretty annoying to people, I'm sure, on LinkedIn. If I see you work somewhere where I think it could be interesting, I'm going to be sliding in. It doesn't work every time, but I probably, if someone is working at a subscription box company for anything, they've probably gotten a LinkedIn ping from me in the last, like year.
That's so good. And like a lot of people forget free stuff like co-marketing. Like back in the day, I used to do a lot of sweepstakes stuff with like another major brand, and we'd both blast all of our email groups with like, here's this co-branded sweepstakes, and we would, not only would we like give away free product, which was super easy to do, but then also each grow both of our email lists from that without it being totally blank, because people knew where it came from. And I feel like I haven't seen as much co-marketing in the last few years, as everyone's sort of been focusing on the prospect acquisition channels that are a little bit more traditional. But co-marketing is great. And I think you proved out a really scrappy way to do it. You don't have to go through an agency, just reach out to someone who works at those companies. And it's interesting. You just approach them and say like, hey, I'll give you like $50 per box or whatever it might be. And they're like, sure. So I love the scrappiness right there. And did you see someone else doing something like that and you're like, oh yeah, I could do that too? Or you're just like, hey, let me just see if someone is willing to say yes here.
I actually don't do any of the subscription box companies, so I don't know that I saw it somewhere else, but it definitely, again, like when thinking through where the growth segments, what are they receiving? Where are they? What is going on in their life? A key thing that kept popping up with Verb, and I think it's kind of self-fulfilling because we send people dog pictures when they sign up. We send them a text of like, wahoo, your order's confirmed, and here's a picture of a dog. But one of the things we keep hearing back are like, oh yeah, like I do a lot with like my dog, I love my dog. And so naturally, still no avail. If anyone is at one of the dog subscription box companies, please ping me back. But that was sort of the idea there. And it was like, okay, if we can't get in there, then it was like, hey, what else are they investing their time in? And a lot of them, when we were doing customer survey sort of questions, like, hey, like where else are you like kind of spending for subscriptions? That came through, which was food subscriptions. So wanted to find one that was aligned with how we think of ourselves as a brand. And HelloFresh, Green Chef definitely, I'm sure a lot of meal kit companies could align very well, but values wise, we align quite closely.
That's awesome.
We're doing a little of the same in the wedding industry. And again, just, LinkedIn, but I think, our partner there kind of sees it as a value add to their customer, offer an exclusive discount. So I don't know if y'all are actually paying, but yeah, I think there's a lot of.
Oh yeah, no, there. For HelloFresh Green Chef, we absolutely pay. We just, what's interesting though, is the CPMs that we pay, because we pay by CPM. The CPMs are actually, sorry about that. Our CPMs are actually lower than Facebook when it comes to the insert, but especially now. I mean, I actually haven't, CPMs have obviously grown quite aggressively on Facebook for most brands. And it was cheaper when it was already a pretty cheap CPM on Facebook. So that's what makes it really exciting of an opportunity.
And now that, maybe you started doing this a little bit before some other people were trying to pay their way into getting inserts, now if the door is getting knocked at those companies for more and more companies to do inserts with them, do you feel like maybe you might be grandfathered into like a better deal because you kind of came to them a little bit earlier and built that relationship, and both of you have learned together what works more, what works a little bit less, and sort of got the system going, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, I find that for negotiated, whenever you're not in programmatic, you absolutely can negotiate things quite aggressively in your favor, but it also can work for the partner. You want them excited, you want them to really help push you. But I found that relationships by far are the thing that propel, like, for number one's money, of course, like everyone has business, so they're money motivated. But number two, a close second is the relationship that you're able to build. Yeah. And yeah, if you believe in people from the beginning, it can work out. There's one brand that we partnered with. They have an app for college students when they're, when they were doing a workout at their school and they checked in, they could get rewards and they could redeem it for different brands, right? And we took a chance on them. We partnered with them before everything kind of went, south with the pandemic and everything, where all of a sudden students were not going to university. They were not going to their university gym. They pivoted the app. They actually were able to grow usership. And instead of raising our rates, we actually got to keep and maintain that same rate because we believed in them and we showed a consistent sort of partnership. And now they're growing quite exponentially.
Yeah. No, I love that. And as someone who runs an organization that sells services, and one that raises our rates every year almost, we look at the people who were with us a little bit earlier, and that relationship is built, and we know that we enjoy working with them, and why break something just because of newer pricing when they've been sort of with us for a little while. So it's just something I've learned, that when people come on a little more recently, as we're a little bit more vetted as an organization, you're getting 2021 pricing. So it's pretty fun. So this question also is kind of similar to the one that was asked by Jacques. How are you thinking about performance and attribution when you're looking at kind of like emerging channels versus SEM paid social? I think Jessica, you touched upon, Owen, you touched upon a little bit that, like, all right, you're not going to get the same performance off the bat and maybe even for a little while. So how do you then gauge it? If you say you're getting a $2.50 CPA from Facebook, I'm just making that up. I'm guessing your CPA is higher than that, but but then something else comes along, you're like, all right, we're getting a $7 CPA, but it's new. So, and it's another channel we need to divest. What's the kind of mental process there?
Yeah, we're in a bit of a shift. I mean, with iOS and all of that, I think I mentioned earlier, we're a little more focused on profitability than growth. And so historically have had a pretty high bar, but now that, measurements kind of up in the air across the board, trying to look at things pretty holistically. So, keeping an eye on LastClick, keeping an eye on post-purchase surveys. We are going to start working with a partner called Measured, who hopefully can help us do like geo-based split tests across new channels, and has a point of view across their kind of client portfolio on new channels that we're testing. But are generally trying to find things like, I think, year after year, it's like we thought we were capped out on Facebook, but can easily like 2 or 3x the budget there. And so it does feel like, if we're not getting close to that, then let's keep focusing on Facebook and get us to above the next benchmark there. And then I guess the other thing that we keep a close eye on is just like the retargeting prospecting mix, and making sure we're not, we try to generally follow like an 80-20 split there. And with any new channel, it's kind of hard to tease out what that split is initially. And so having a strong point of view there, and making sure we're kind of getting to a benchmark that's not quite Facebook, but just a little less, and not giving too much of a leeway to new channels.
Okay, so you judge them roughly similarly to your core channels. Like, you want to get those numbers pretty close, otherwise it's difficult for you to continue.
Yeah, and I think, if it's like, affiliate's so interesting because there's like, you can play with the model, it's pay for performance, so that's easy. And then Also giving some haircuts for, if something's extremely top of funnel, like I said, keep a close eye on retargeting. But again, yeah, for the most part, it does feel like, there's probably still room to grow on Facebook. iOS made things trickier, but still performs well. And so, yeah, are keeping a few things on that like seem like they have potential, but generally will kind of cull pretty quickly if we're not getting close.
Interesting. Okay, cool. And how about yourself, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, like one positive thing about iOS 14, right, is that it's really forced people to examine the obsession that has happened over the last 10 years of digital marketing around a LastClick attribution model. Like it's really actually forced people to start to wonder why it is that so many brands were willing to invest probably sometimes more money than it would have cost to put it in marketing, to try to prove what each channel is doing to some nth degree of accuracy. I think it's starting to cause people to really question, why were we doing that so aggressively? Like, what was the original purpose? And the original purpose was to make sure that there was intentionality behind what was kind of going on with marketing, and not just blindly spending in a way that wasn't benefiting a company, because there used to be a lot of wild spend for no reason. But it kind of swung in an opposite direction to a point where I think it was pretty damaging, to be honest, in terms of really looking at things from a holistic sort of point of view. So I'm kind of glad it happened. And, I'm also kind of glad that we're going to be cookieless relatively soon, because that's like the next thing. And iOS 15 is going to impact email marketing. I'm kind of glad all these things are happening now, because we can start to figure out what it is that we're going to do to approach it. So with some of the different new emerging channels, I don't necessarily hold it to the same exact sort of, I really try to see like what growth segment is this going to reach. I know I've talked a lot about growth segments, but there are certain ones that will have different values than like others. Some will be assumed. Others will have been backed heavily by data. We know for a fact that our millennial mom core segment, with those 202, are incredibly loyal, have impeccable LTV. We know college students, as our brand was actually born out of a college dorm room, do not have as impeccable LTV, are not as loyal. It kind of makes sense though, why, why would they be getting bars delivered to their dorm every month? It's a little, they kind of want to buy it when they want to buy it. And, they have a different probably set like an income expectation versus someone who's a little bit more established in their life. So I can't judge it the exact same way. If there's a channel that perhaps, is going to be, more expensive, but is going to help me reach this higher intent audience that I know has a higher LTV, I might have to take the little bit of the hit in the beginning and hope to see what that cohort matures. Now, there's cash flow. I got to make sure I'm not spending more than actually we are able to spend, of course. But if I take that into consideration, I build in what the test budget can be while still achieving our blended overarching goals, then that money can really go to, a channel that I have no expectation to ever be able to perform at the same sort of a CAC of Facebook. Examples of that, I mean, to me, eventually we will go into TV, direct mailers I could see. Influencer is now very expensive, but if we're going into more of a realm of those on more of a celebrity sort of level, we might be willing to invest a little bit more, just because we can see the long-term effects of us feeling like a more legitimate brand and getting more of that legitimacy. So yeah, there are certain things that, I honestly have testing plans that say we won't look at it for a year. And literally that's a part of the testing plan. And how we track it. An instance of that, we partner with an entertainment agency that seeds our product in different movies and TV shows. if anyone thinks I'm getting some direct attribution from those efforts, absolutely not. But are we going to be tracking how did you hear about us if they have seen us in that TV show and we know it's about to come out, or for that movie when we know it's about to come out? And yes, we know, because they confirmed before that the scene's there for us to you know, actually make sure that they get paid. So those sort of things are not for a year. You know, we'll probably be in Love is Blind season 3. That's probably not coming out for a year, but you know, that's what we want to track. There are certain things that if we want to be a brand for the long term, we have to put that investment in. We have to see what it can happen over time. And if we were to compare it to Facebook, we're just going to have the worst time for some of these channels. Like there just would be apps, even ones that are like more similar, like TikTok. If we had said, okay, we ran this test on TikTok, it was terrible, and if we had done this, we would never see the incredible impact that it had after we actually got it right, and just how incredibly competitive it actually could be to Facebook. Less scale still, but still, it's actually a pretty decent amount of scale that you can get per month. So that's how I tend to think about it.
Again, I love it. You know, both of you have some level of similarity, but definitely a lot of differentiation in the way both of you approach it, and think about how to weigh it out and like when to turn it on and turn it off. And it's great. I love seeing like, you know, different approaches to the same kind of issues and questions and problems. And the next question is super interesting because it's difficult to really, and it comes actually perfectly right after what both of you were saying. You know, like, when is time? Like, what is the, you know, is there, how do you know when it's time to sort of pull the plug on a particular channel in terms of like how long you've been going at it? Is there sort of a real methodology, or have you felt like it's just a lot more into intuition and like there isn't like an obvious rubric in terms of, okay, well, this happened, this happened, this happened per my rubric and my like playbook, it's time to turn it off? Because I would love some guidance on that, because I've had no idea what to do when like something doesn't work.
Yeah, I feel like ideally we would have a rubric, but I mean, I think I've operated in the past, like multiple companies, it is just, you know, channel by channel and like channel owner by channel owner. So I think, I mean, like I said before, like really making sure that we've invested the resources there, whether that be a consultant, you know, if we're running it internally initially, then like say, hey, do we switch up the resources that are committed to this? Can we reinvest in creative here in a more meaningful way? And at least taking a few turns at that before really calling it on the channel. But, you know, given our not differences, but I guess, you know, saying that we're trying to get to the Facebook point does give us a higher bar and does probably call us to call a few channels earlier. But I mean, I think as long as you're seeing some incremental growth, you know, give it a couple months at least, probably give it a couple turns from a resource perspective. And if you're like, if it is a DR channel and you're seeing some growth there, usually a pretty easy call to keep investing. But you know, if you're flatlining after a couple months or a couple quarters, I feel like that's generally when we call it.
Makes sense. Jessica, any thoughts on like what is the signal to say, all right, this is probably not going to end up, or not necessarily not that it won't end up working, but we're just going to not move forward with continuing on this?
Yeah, and I mean, like if you take the step beforehand to do the projection based off the CPM, the CTR, and the conversion rate, hopefully it can give a little guidance that if you know that you're not even close in the realm of what your projection would be, it should be easy enough to back into the math to say, okay, well, if I spend another 1,000 based off the conversion rate I'm getting, this is what's going to happen. And if I do another 5,000, this is what's likely going to happen. So I think that like for a lot of channels, if it's programmatic, it's pretty easy to be able to tell like when you should pull it, reevaluate if it's the channel for you, or if it's like what Owen was saying, something about creative or something of the like. But if it's a longer one, like a podcast or direct mailers or something, or television or OTT, any of those, yeah, you have to let it have its time. I definitely like to ask up front, because with those channels, you typically do need some sort of agency or a consultant or something to really tap into. I ask them, okay, if this is going to be a successful campaign, tell me every single thing that you think I need to do. What is every single thing? So that way they say every single thing, if you do all of this, and so then I'll do it. I will literally just do it. And then I gotta tell you, I have people who've been like, I've been in this space for 20 years, like, and I would have thought this worked. And I'm like, well, I did it exactly like you said. You're the expert. You said this would be the way to get the best success. So here we are. And they're like, no, like, it's fair. I would turn it off. And that has worked out quite successfully, because otherwise I feel like every other month they'll be like, oh, you didn't do this, so that's actually, and then you got to test that out. And it's like, I'd rather just from the beginning get as close to it as possible and give it the real college try than kind of halfway through it. Like, kind of like, and if you can't give it the full try, then maybe evaluate if you really should go into the channel if you can't invest in it.
Sorry, I was muted. So to summarize a little bit, like, get all the expert strategic stuff beforehand and make a real plan and be like, all right, here's what works, based off what the experts say. And so you feel like you gave it the real swing. That's great. I like that, because there's always sort of, you can continue with the channel and you nailed it. There's always just the kind of like, well, hey, maybe we didn't try this, so that's why it didn't work. Or, hey, the creative wasn't good enough. This is why it didn't work. Or like, the season is off for what we're doing, so maybe that's why this didn't work. So there's always those like contingencies and feelings, and so it's tough. It's a really tough struggle to know the perfect way. But I think you didn't necessarily say, oh, this is the exact time to cut it off, but you did create a plan for someone to like just make sure you're doing it right, not just limping in, but doing it right based on what all the learnings and research that you can gather. So I like that a lot. I think we are coming up on the end of the event right now. This has been super fun. I definitely learned a lot. I did not know what a micro affiliate was previously. I don't know, this was just really great. And I think this is something that a lot of senior level growth folks are struggling with right now as they try to divest. And what I really love is that a lot of luckily I'm old enough to see like a lot of the channels previous to paid social. And I like that, like, you're going back into a lot of those older bags, like paying for inserts. We're going to see, like, I don't know if you've ever seen those like Valpak coupons that have like a bunch of like cutout coupons for different brands. People are going to start thinking that they're going to go a lot more non-digital. There's going to be a lot more unique, quote unquote, free partnerships between a lot of different companies. And I think what this is going to do is make everyone a little bit more creative versus just pounding the paid social channel. And it's going to make the companies that have better products stand out versus the ones that don't. And so it's fun. But thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Owen. I'm going to leave my email address here in case anyone wants to send any notes for any reason. But this was amazing. Thank you both.